They're disappearing, quietly, without warning. The ones who once spoke deeply, who felt everything, who saw beyond the surface of life, they're fading from the noise of society. You might wonder why. Why are the most spiritually awake becoming silent, distant, unseen? It's not because they've given up. It's because they've finally awakened. They no longer find peace in chaos or truth in the crowd. They are retreating, not out of weakness but out of wisdom. Because once your soul sees through illusion, you can never unsee. You begin to crave only one thing: silence, truth, and divine stillness within. Before we begin, take a deep breath. Inhale slowly through your nose. Exhale gently through your mouth. Feel the stillness entering your body. Feel the space between your thoughts grow wider. Feel your awareness settle into this moment, because in stillness, the truth becomes visible. Today's message is for those who have begun to see beyond illusion, for those who feel disconnected from the noise of society, not because they are lost, but because they are waking up. If you have noticed yourself withdrawing from conversations, from crowds, from the endless chase for validation, understand this: you are not broken. You are becoming whole. When spiritual awakening begins, it does not start with light and laughter. It often begins with discomfort. You start to sense that something is not right. You look around and see people trapped in patterns, working without purpose, speaking without truth, searching for meaning in material things. And suddenly the life you once lived no longer feels natural. The friends you once connected with now seem distant. The activities that once entertained you now feel empty. It's as if you can see the strings behind the puppet show and the illusion no longer fascinates you. That is the first sign of awakening. You begin to see. You start to notice how society thrives on distraction. People scroll endlessly through screens to avoid silence. They chase trends to escape themselves. They seek recognition because they have forgotten their own worth. But when your consciousness begins to rise, you can no longer play that game. Your awareness becomes too sharp, too real. You begin to crave simplicity. Not more noise, not more possessions, not more people. Just quiet. You long for nature, the sound of wind through trees, the feeling of rain on your skin, because nature carries no pretense. It simply is. And that is what your soul remembers, to simply be. When you awaken, stillness becomes your medicine. No longer do you find excitement in constant movement. You start to see that busyness is often a form of avoidance. People keep themselves occupied because they fear the silence that would reveal their emptiness. But you are different now. You have begun to face that silence not as an enemy, but as a teacher. And in that silence, you begin to hear your own soul speak. You begin to sense that everything you were searching for outside was always within. That realization changes everything. You stop needing to explain yourself. You stop trying to prove your worth. You stop chasing what was never meant for you. The world calls it withdrawal, but the awakened call it returning home. Home to peace, home to awareness, home to the truth of who you are. And because society cannot understand this shift, it labels you as detached, antisocial, or strange. But you are none of those things. You are simply remembering what most have forgotten, that life is sacred, that silence heals, that stillness reveals. And so, you begin to disappear, not out of rejection for the world, but out of alignment with something greater. You start walking slower, listening deeper, breathing fully. You begin to exist intentionally. The noise of society fades like a distant echo, and for the first time, you feel alive, not as a role you play, but as pure awareness itself. That is why the spiritually awake often seem to vanish. They have not escaped life, they have finally entered it fully, without illusion, without distraction, without fear. They live in presence, in truth, and in peace. The reason why spiritually awake people are quietly disappearing from society is because they have reached a level of awareness that makes the noise of this world unbearable. When a person begins to awaken, They start seeing through the illusions that once controlled them. They no longer find joy in the chaos, in the endless chase for money, validation, or approval. They begin to see how people move like puppets, controlled by trends, fears, and desires that aren't even their own. And so, naturally, they begin to withdraw. Not because they are weak, not because they are lost, but because they have found something deeper, something that cannot be found in the external world. You see, society today thrives on distraction. It rewards noise and punishes silence. It glorifies the image over the essence, the appearance over authenticity. Spiritually awake people begin to realize this imbalance, and they understand that continuing to participate in this illusion only drains their energy. So, they choose peace over participation. They choose solitude over superficial connection. They choose to walk away from the noise, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. Because when you awaken, your energy becomes sacred. You start to sense how every word, every thought, every environment affects your vibration. You feel when something is fake. You feel when someone's words don't match their energy. And that sensitivity becomes both a gift and a burden. You can no longer tolerate what you once accepted. Crowded rooms feel heavy, small talk feels empty, and chasing worldly success feels meaningless when you've touched the vastness of your own soul. Many people don't understand this journey. They think disappearing means isolation, but in truth it means connection on a higher level. Spiritually awake people aren't disappearing to escape the world. They are disappearing to realign with it, to reconnect with nature, with silence, with God, with truth. They are not rejecting humanity, they are rejecting the artificial version of it. They no longer need to prove who they are. They no longer crave to be seen or heard, because they know what is real does not need validation. Their peace has become more valuable than popularity, their stillness more meaningful than attention. And so, they quietly step back, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. They observe more and speak less. They understand that not everyone can meet them where they are, and that's okay. Because awakening is not a group journey, it's an individual one. Each soul must awaken in its own time, in its own way. And so, those who have awakened do not force their light upon others. They simply carry it within, allowing it to guide their path as they disappear from the noise, not to vanish, but to rise silently beyond it. When a person becomes spiritually awake, they begin to realize how much of society is built on illusion. They start to see how deeply people are trapped in patterns of fear, ego, and attachment. Everywhere they look, they notice people chasing after things that do not bring peace. Money, fame, status, attention, believing these things will complete them. But an awakened soul knows the truth. Nothing external can fill the emptiness that comes from being disconnected from oneself. And when they see this, they no longer wish to participate in the same cycle. They begin to detach, not from love, but from illusion. They stop chasing people. They stop explaining themselves. They stop arguing with those who cannot see. Instead, they turn inward, where the real answers live. This inner turning is not weakness, it is power. Because true awakening is not about doing more, it is about seeing more clearly. The spiritually awake begin to sense the energy behind things. They can feel when a conversation is empty, when someone's intentions are impure, when an environment is toxic. They don't need proof, they can feel it in their spirit. And once you start to feel life on that level, it becomes impossible to live the same way again. You stop forcing connections that drain you. You stop pretending to be okay in places where your soul feels heavy. You stop entertaining conversations that pull you away from your peace. Instead, you begin to walk in silence. You begin to protect your energy as something sacred. You realize that not everyone deserves access to your spirit, and that not everyone can understand your silence. Some people will say, "You've changed," but what they don't understand is, you didn't change, you just woke up. You stopped participating in the illusion. You stopped betraying your spirit for the sake of fitting in. You stopped seeking light in places full of shadows. And this is why spiritually awake people disappear. They no longer belong to the same vibration they once did. They move differently. They love differently. They speak differently. They no longer need to be seen to feel real. They no longer need to be understood to be at peace. They have realized that the real battle is not out there, it's within. It's the battle between your higher self and your lower self, between truth and illusion, between what you know and what you pretend not to know. And when you win that inner battle, you outgrow the world that once defined you. You begin to exist in a quieter space, a sacred space, where peace, not noise, becomes your home. That is where the awakened ones live, not in the spotlight, not in the noise, but in the stillness between their breaths, where truth whispers and the soul finally rests. As the awakening deepens, something even more profound begins to unfold. The spiritually awake person realizes that their silence is not absence, it is presence in its purest form. You see, society glorifies noise, constant talking, sharing, proving, posting, and performing. But the awakened soul sees the trap in all of it. They see how people have become addicted to attention, mistaking validation for connection and distraction for peace. The awakened no longer wish to live that way. They withdraw not because they are cold, but because they are learning the language of silence. In silence, they begin to hear life again. They hear the rhythm of their breath. They hear the truth of their intuition. They hear the whisper of the divine that speaks between the pauses of the world's noise. When you are truly awake, you no longer crave the approval of others. You crave alignment. You begin to seek out stillness the way others seek comfort. You realize that you do not need to be everywhere. You only need to be where peace is. You no longer explain your journey because you understand that words cannot describe what the soul experiences. The awakening is too vast for language. It can only be lived, not explained. And so, the awakened person grows quieter, softer, more intentional. Their words carry energy. Their silence carries wisdom. Their presence alone speaks volumes. But to the unawakened, this silence feels uncomfortable. They do not understand why you no longer react, why you no longer gossip, why you no longer fight for attention. They mistake your peace for distance. They call you withdrawn, detached, strange. Yet in truth, you have simply learned to listen more than you speak, to observe more than you react, to understand more than you judge. You begin to see that most arguments are just egos trying to be right. Most conversations are people trying to be heard, not to understand. So you stop engaging in battles that drain your energy. You learn the art of walking away, not out of pride, but out of wisdom. Because you know that silence is the most powerful teacher. It reveals everything. In silence, masks fall away, truth stands naked, illusion dissolves, and what remains is essence, the real, the eternal. This is why spiritually awake people are disappearing. Not because they have given up on the world, but because they have chosen to live above its noise. They have found that solitude is not loneliness, it is sanctuary. It is the space where the soul can breathe without interruption, where one can hear the heartbeat of existence itself. When you reach that level of awareness, you stop needing the world to understand you. You no longer chase belonging. You realize you already belong everywhere and nowhere at once. You exist in harmony with what is. That is the silent revolution of the awakened, to live unseen yet fully alive, to walk quietly yet carry the light of understanding wherever they go. There comes a point on every awakened soul's journey where they understand the path is not about isolation, but purification. Disappearing from society is not rejection, it is renewal. The spiritually awake are not running away from the world, they are returning to themselves. They withdraw so they can remember what is real beneath all the noise. They are not lost, they are aligning. When a person awakens, they begin to see how the world feeds on distraction, how the mind constantly reaches outward for meaning, while the soul gently whispers, look within, and so they step back. They stop feeding the endless cycle of noise and drama. They stop seeking temporary comfort in material things. They begin to walk a quieter path, one guided by inner truth, not external approval. You see, when your consciousness expands, your vibration rises, and those still caught in illusion can no longer connect to your frequency. It is not rejection, it is resonance. The energies that once surrounded you cannot stay because they are not aligned with who you are becoming. This is why people drift away. This is why you feel alone at times. But solitude is not punishment, it is purification. In solitude, the awakened rediscover the depth of their own spirit. They learn to find joy in stillness, wisdom in simplicity, and strength in surrender. They start to live with intention. Every word becomes sacred. Every breath becomes prayer. Every act becomes meditation. The world may call them strange, distant, or cold, but in truth, they are more alive than ever. Because they have stopped existing merely on the surface of life, they now live from the center of their being. They no longer look for purpose in things, they embody it. They no longer seek love, they become it. And so, they disappear, not to hide, but to merge with the deeper flow of existence. They understand that the greatest impact one can make is not always visible. The quiet ones shift the energy of the world not through noise, but through presence. They hold light silently in their hearts, radiating peace into the chaos. Their disappearance is a silent act of rebellion against a world addicted to noise. It is their way of saying, I will no longer feed the illusions that keep humanity asleep. Instead, I will anchor truth within myself. This is why spiritually awake people vanish. They are not gone, they are transforming. They are learning the art of living without being consumed, of seeing without judgment, of existing without attachment. Their journey becomes invisible to the eyes, but luminous to the soul. And if you too feel this call to withdraw, to step back, to simplify, to listen, it is not because you are falling behind. It is because you are rising higher. You are awakening to a reality where silence is strength, where solitude is sacred, and where peace is the greatest wealth. Walk that path with grace. The world may not understand you, but your soul always will. Before we end, take a slow breath. Inhale deeply through your nose. Exhale softly through your mouth. Feel the space between your thoughts. That silence, that stillness, is the very essence of awakening. Because when a person becomes spiritually awake, they begin to understand that the true journey is not about escaping the world, but seeing it clearly for what it is. They realize that society is not evil, it is simply asleep. And the awakened no longer judge the sleeping, they simply stop trying to wake them. They understand that awakening cannot be forced. It can only happen when the soul is ready. So, instead of shouting truth into deaf ears, they live the truth silently. They become the example, not the preacher. They carry light not in words, but in their energy. This is why you may notice spiritually awake people becoming quieter, softer, almost invisible. They are not interested in proving their awareness. They are not trying to convince anyone of what they've seen or felt. They have learned that truth does not need defense. It only needs embodiment. They disappear from society's chaos because they have found a deeper connection within themselves. They are no longer chasing purpose. They are living it. They are no longer fighting darkness. They are transcending it. Their energy becomes calm, steady, and unshakable. They begin to see the divine in everything. The sunrise, the laughter of a child, even the pain that once broke them. Because awakening is not about escaping pain. It's about understanding it, integrating it, and transforming it into wisdom. The spiritually awake no longer live reactively. They have stopped being pulled by every emotion, every opinion, every external event. Instead, they stand in stillness, like a mountain unmoved by the winds of the world. From this place of awareness, their silence becomes a force. Their peace becomes a mirror that exposes illusion. And their disappearance from society is not absence, it is mastery. They have realized that the more you talk, the more energy you leak. But when you are silent and aware, your presence alone can awaken others. That is the power of stillness. It teaches without words. It heals without touch. It uplifts without trying. So if you too feel the pull to disappear, to step back from the noise, from the endless need to explain, to prove, to be seen, understand this: you are not fading away. You are refining your energy. You are being called to protect your frequency, to nurture your spirit, to return to the sacred space where your soul feels at home. The world will continue spinning in noise and illusion, but you must remain anchored in awareness. That is how you serve. That is how you lead. Not by shouting louder than others, but by embodying peace so deeply that others feel it in your presence. This is the final truth of awakening. You disappear not to escape the world, but to merge with the essence of all things, to become one with the silence from which everything is born.